She didn't even try to hide it. "He smells like an old woman," she said, loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear. I was sitting right there. My son didn't stop her, didn't look at me, didn't say a single word. I kept my eyes on the table, but my hands were shaking. Not from age, from the moment it hit me. I was no longer a father in that house, just something they tolerated until they didn't have to anymore. It happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the same split-level house my son Brian had begged me to move into after my hip surgery. "Just till you get steady again, Dad," he told me 6 months earlier. "You shouldn't be alone." I believed him because he was my boy, and because when you get past 70, you start wanting to believe kindness before you question it. His wife, Melissa, stood at the stove like she owned the air in that kitchen. Maybe she did. Everything in that house had her touch on it. The white cabinets, the glass bowls nobody used, the rules taped to the fridge in neat handwriting. Rinse your plate, keep bathroom dry, no food upstairs. It looked organized. It felt like a warning. I said, "I can hear just fine, Melissa." She turned and shrugged like I was the one making it awkward. "Well, Harold, I'm just being honest. The kids noticed it too." That made me lift my head. "The kids?" My grandson Tyler stared into his cereal. My little granddaughter Emma looked at me, then at her mother, like she was waiting to learn which face to copy. Brian finally spoke, but not to defend me. "Dad, maybe let's not do this at breakfast." That was the sentence that did it. Not her cruelty, his weakness. I looked at him and saw a man I barely recognized. 43 years old, broad shoulders, clean polo shirt, coffee in his hand, and not 1 ounce of backbone when it came to his own father. I raised him after his mother died. Worked 31 years at the post office. Missed meals, missed sleep, missed half my own life making sure his stayed whole. And there he sat, eyes down, acting like I was some embarrassing problem that had wandered in off the street. Melissa wiped her hands and said, "Actually, Brian and I talked. It might be better if your father had a little more privacy." I knew that tone. Fake soft, real cold. Then she said it. "The garage is cleaned out." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard her. But then Brian rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Just temporary, Dad. We put in a bed. A TV, too." I stared at my son so long he had to look away. That was when I understood this had been discussed, planned, while I was sleeping under their roof, while I was thanking them, while I was still calling it home. I pushed my chair back slow and careful, because rage at my age has to move through old bones first. Then I stood up and said the one thing that made Melissa's face change. "Go open that garage," I told them. "And I'll show you exactly who you just tried to bury." I didn't raise my voice. That surprised them. I could see it in the way Melissa paused, like she expected yelling, maybe even tears, but I'd already gone past that point. When something breaks deep enough, it goes quiet first. Brian stood up halfway. "Dad, come on, let's just talk about it." "We are talking," I said. "Right now." He hesitated, then walked ahead of me toward the door that led into the garage. I followed behind him. I could hear Melissa's footsteps too, lighter, impatient. The kids stayed at the table. Smart of them. Brian opened the door. The smell hit first. Cold concrete, old cardboard, motor oil. Then I saw it. A narrow bed pushed against the wall, one of those folding ones with thin metal legs. A small TV on a crate. A space heater plugged into an extension cord that looked older than my grandson. My suitcase sat in the corner, already packed. I looked at that suitcase for a long moment. I hadn't packed it. That meant one of them had. Carefully, quietly, like moving out a piece of furniture nobody wanted anymore. "Melissa thought it'd be more comfortable," Brian said behind me. His voice sounded smaller in here. "Comfortable," I repeated. I stepped inside. The concrete was cold even through my shoes. I reached down and pressed my hand against that bed. Thin, cheap, temporary in the worst kind of way. Did you try it? I asked. What? Brian said. Did you lay on it, even once, before deciding it was good enough for your father? Silence. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Melissa crossed her arms. You're making this into something it's not. We just need boundaries. The house is crowded and… I turned to her. No, don't fix it with words now. You already said what you meant at that table. Her lips tightened. She didn't like being stopped. Brian tried again. Dad, it's not permanent. Just until things settle down. Things, I said. Or me. That landed. He didn't answer. I walked over to my suitcase and opened it. Clothes folded. Not the way I do it. Too neat. Too quick. Someone trying not to think about what they were doing. Under the shirts was the wooden box I always kept with me. Old, scratched, nothing special to look at. I lifted it out and held it in both hands. Brian noticed. What's that? I looked at him. Really looked this time. You remember when you were 12, I said slowly, and you broke your arm falling off that bike? He frowned. Yeah. What does that have to do with… I worked double shifts for 3 months, I continued. Paid every hospital bill. Never told you how close I came to losing the house that year. Melissa shifted, uncomfortable now. I tapped the box lightly. Everything that kept this family standing is in here. Brian's face changed. Confusion first, then something else. Something closer to concern. What do you mean? I met his eyes and said, very calm, very clear. Before you decide where I belong in this house, you might want to understand exactly what you've been living on. I set the box down on that thin bed, and for the first time since I walked into that garage, Brian looked nervous. Brian didn't speak right away. He just stared at that box like it might open itself and explain everything for him. Melissa didn't have that patience. She stepped closer, arms still folded. What is this? Some kind of stunt? She said. I didn't even look at her. Open it, I told Brian. He hesitated, then reached down and lifted the lid. Inside were papers, old ones, edges worn, corners bent from years of being handled and kept. He picked up the top document and unfolded it slowly. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. What is this? He asked, quieter now. You tell me, I said. He swallowed. It's the deed to this house. Melissa stepped in closer. Let me see that. She grabbed it from his hand, scanning fast, like she didn't believe what she was reading. But the truth doesn't change just because you rush it. It's under your name, Brian said, looking at me again. Not mine. I nodded once. I bought this place 12 years ago, I said. Cash! When you told me you and Melissa couldn't get approved for a loan. Brian blinked like he was trying to remember something he'd never paid attention to in the first place. You said you were helping us with the down payment. I said I'd take care of it, I corrected. You never asked how. Melissa's voice sharpened. That doesn't make sense. We've been paying the mortgage. No, I said calmly. You've been sending money every month to an account I set up. Brian's face went pale. What account? The same one that's been covering the actual property taxes, insurance, repairs, everything you never saw. Silence filled that garage. Heavy. Real. Melissa shook her head. No, that's not possible. You've been living in a house that's mine, I said, thinking you were carrying it. Brian sat down on that thin bed without even realizing it. The metal frame creaked under his weight. Why wouldn't you tell me? He asked. I looked at him for a long second. Because you were my son, I said. And I didn't want you to feel small. That hit harder than anything else. Melissa stepped back now, her confidence slipping just a little. So what are you saying exactly? I finally turned to her. I'm saying, I said, steady as I'd ever been. You tried to move me into a garage, in a house I never stopped paying for. Brian dragged his hands down his face. Jesus, I reached into the box again and pulled out another paper. This one newer, clean, sharp. "I wasn't planning to show you this today," I said. Brian looked up. "What is it?" I held it between my fingers, not handing it over yet. "It's a transfer document," I said. "Prepared last month." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "Transfer to who?" I looked at Brian, then past him, toward the kitchen where the kids were still sitting, and I said quietly, "That depends on what happens next." Brian stood up fast. "Dad, what does that mean?" I closed the box slowly, placed the paper back inside, and rested my hand on the lid. "It means," I said, "you don't get to decide where I sleep anymore." Then I looked straight at Melissa. "But I do get to decide who stays in this house?" And for the first time since this started, she didn't have a single word to say. Brian looked like he was trying to stand on ground that kept shifting under him. He kept glancing between me, the box, and Melissa, like one of us would explain this in a way that made it smaller. Nobody did. "Dad, we've been paying you every month," he said. "All those transfers." "I never touched that money," I said. "It's still there." That stopped him cold. "What?" I set it aside. "Every payment you made. Every dollar." Melissa stepped forward again, her voice tighter now. "So what? You've just been sitting on it? For what reason?" I let out a slow breath. "Because I knew one day I might need to remind you what things actually cost." Brian shook his head. "I don't understand. Why wouldn't you just tell me?" "Because you never asked," I said. "You got comfortable. You stopped checking. You stopped wondering. You just assumed." That word hung in the air. Melissa scoffed. "This is unbelievable. You're turning this into some kind of power play because of one comment?" I looked at her, really looked this time. "You think this started this morning?" She didn't answer. I took a step closer, not aggressive, just steady. "You've been chipping away at me for months. The little comments, the rules, the way you talk around me like I'm not in the room. Today was just the first time you stopped hiding it." Her jaw tightened. "We've been patient with you." "Patient," I repeated quietly. "In my own house." That word hit her harder than she expected. Brian ran his hands through his hair again. Okay, let's just slow down. Nobody needs to leave. We can fix this." I nodded slightly. "We can, but not the way you think." He looked at me, desperate now. "Then how?" I walked over to the door leading back into the kitchen. I could hear the faint clink of a spoon, Emma whispering something to her brother. Life going on like nothing had just cracked wide open. Then I turned back to them. "You said the kids noticed something," I said. Brian winced. "Dad." "No," I said, calm but firm. "Let's finish that thought." Melissa shifted. "It's just, kids say things. Kids repeat things," I corrected. That landed. She looked away. I nodded once. That's what I thought. The silence stretched again, heavier now, more honest. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Old thing, scratched screen. Still works. Brian frowned. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling someone," I said. Melissa crossed her arms again, defensive. "Who?" I looked at her for a moment, then back at Brian. "An attorney," I said, "and a realtor." Brian's face dropped. "Wait, what?" "You heard me." He stepped forward. "Dad, no, you can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I will." Melissa's voice sharpened again, panic slipping through now. "You're overreacting. This is ridiculous." I shook my head slowly. "No, what's ridiculous is thinking I'd stay where I'm not wanted." Brian's voice cracked a little. "That's not true." I held his gaze. "Then why was my suitcase already packed?" That shut him down completely. I let the silence sit there, let it do the work. Then I said, quieter this time, "I'm not going to the garage, Brian." He swallowed. I know, we'll fix it, just, I'm not staying in this house either." That hit harder than anything before. Melissa's eyes widened. "You're leaving?" I nodded once. Then I picked up the wooden box, held it close, and walked toward the door. But before I stepped inside, I stopped, turned back, and said the one thing neither of them was ready to hear. When the papers go through, you won't be leaving a father behind. I looked directly at Melissa. You'll be looking for somewhere else to live. Brian followed me into the kitchen like he was afraid I might disappear if he lost sight of me. Melissa stayed behind for a second, then came to, slower this time, like she was walking into something she couldn't control anymore. The kids looked up. Emma smiled at me the way she always did. "Grandpa, are you okay?" That almost broke me, but I held it together. "I'm all right, sweetheart," I said softly. Brian stepped closer. "Dad, don't do anything you can't take back." I turned to him. "I've been taking things back my whole life, quietly. You just never noticed." Melissa let out a sharp breath. "So that's it? You're just going to throw us out? Your own family?" I looked at her, calm. "No, I'm finally going to stop letting you push me out of my own life." She shook her head. "We needed space. That's all this was." "No," I said. "You needed control." That landed clean. Brian rubbed his face again. Okay. What do you want, Dad? Just say it. We'll fix it." I was quiet for a moment, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted him to understand what he was asking. Then I said it. "I want the truth." He frowned. "About what?" "About when this started," I said. "Not today. Not the smell. Not the garage. Before that." Melissa stiffened. Brian noticed. He looked at her. "Mel?" She didn't answer. I nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Brian's voice dropped. "What are you talking about?" I set the wooden box down on the table this time. Not hidden, not protected. 3 months ago, I said, I got a call from the bank. Brian blinked. "What bank?" "The one tied to that account you've been sending money to." Melissa's eyes flickered. Just for a second. But I saw it. "I was told someone had tried to access it," I continued. "Not me." Brian turned to her fully now. "Melissa," she finally spoke. "I was just checking things, that's all." "Checking," I repeated. She lifted her chin. "We had a right to know. It's our home." I let that sit, then shook my head once. "No," I said quietly. "It never was." Brian's voice sharpened. "What did you try to do?" Melissa snapped back. "I didn't do anything. I just wanted access in case something happened to him." "To me," I said. "Say it right." She didn't. Brian stepped closer to her. "Did you try to move money?" Silence. That was answer enough. I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding that air for weeks. "That's when I started preparing," I said. "The transfer papers, the accounts, everything." Brian looked like he'd been hit. You were planning this?" "I was protecting myself," I said, "from people who were already planning something else." Melissa's voice came out sharper now, defensive, cracking. "Oh, come on, you're twisting this. We were just being practical." "Practical," I repeated. Then I leaned forward slightly, my voice lower now, heavier. Moving me into the garage wasn't about space. No one spoke. "It was about making me smaller," I said. "Easier to ignore, easier to manage, easier to push out completely when the time came." Brian shook his head, but it was weak. No, that's not." "It is," I said. He stopped. I straightened up again, feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not anymore. Clarity. "I didn't say anything 3 months ago," I continued. "I watched. I listened. I waited." Melissa laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So this whole time you've been spying on us?" "No," I said. "I've been seeing you." That shut her up. Brian's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Dad, who are you transferring everything to?" I looked at him, then over at Emma, who was still sitting there quietly, watching all of this without understanding. Then back at him, and I said, "Not you." The room went completely still. Brian's face drained of color. "What do you mean? Not me?" I didn't answer right away. I picked up the box again, opened it, and pulled out that final document. This time, I handed it to him. His hands shook as he took it. Melissa leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Her breath caught first. "No," she said under her breath. Brian scanned the page once, twice, then slower, like maybe the words would change if he gave them time. They're in Emma's name?" he asked. I nodded. "A trust," I said. "Locked, protected. She gets it when she's old enough to understand what it means." Melissa stepped back like the paper burned her. "This is insane. She's a child." "Yes," I said. "And she still knows how to look at me like I matter." That hit harder than anything before. Brian's voice cracked. "Dad, you're cutting me out completely." I looked at him, steady. "No, you did that yourself." Silence. The kind that doesn't leave room for arguing anymore. Emma slid off her chair slowly and walked over to me. Small steps. Careful. She reached for my hand. "Grandpa, are you going somewhere?" she asked. I squeezed her hand gently. "Yeah, sweetheart, I am." Her grip tightened just a little. Brian watched that, something breaking across his face. Something real this time. "Dad, please," he said. "We can fix this. I messed up. I should have said something. I should have stopped it." I held his gaze. "You should have," I said. Melissa shook her head, desperate now. "You're blowing this apart over one mistake." I didn't even look at her. "It wasn't one," I said. Brian stepped closer, his voice low. "If you walk out, that's it, isn't it?" I picked up my suitcase. "The same one they'd packed for me." "It already was," I said. He flinched. I walked toward the front door, Emma still holding my hand. At the doorway, I knelt down slowly, joints complaining like they always do. I looked at her. "You be kind, all right?" I said. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." She nodded, eyes wide. I stood up, opened the door, and stepped outside. Behind me, I heard Brian say my name. Not loud, not strong, just late. I didn't turn around. The door stayed open for a moment. Then quietly, it closed. If this story meant something to you, subscribe. There's more to come.